This entire setup is always a work in progress, but today let's do things a bit differently. First off, this CRT monitor. It does take up a lot of space, but I'm actually more focused on getting some use out of this, and the best way we can do that right now is by taking this and moving it over there. Nice. Initially, I put the monitor in the corner over there at an angle so we could actually still see the display, but it was more hidden than I wanted it to be, and even though it's no cinema display, I still want to actually see the monitor itself, especially while it's in use, because it's a very cool CRT display and it just has that classic early 2000s design to it. With that out of the way, we can move on to this. The plan for this area is to make more space. We're going to leave this as it is, but we're going to push it off to the side, just like that. And now that we have all of this new space available, we need to remove this and this G5 because this area is also getting a new upgrade. What's funny about this additional space here is that the setup itself doesn't even fit in frame anymore. This addition here has been a big game changer to the setup. And now we have two of them. It sure is bringing a lot more functionality to the setup as a whole. Because of the additional space that we now have, it's left us with a gap between the new addition and the Y2K setup. The plan here is to take the entire Y2K setup and push it up against the new shelving unit, and with that, we can also expand this area so it's not as cramped. The desk and the G5 have been moved over, and even though it's not a significant change, I honestly think that it looks even better than before because it has more direct lighting, which really adds to that early 2000s futuristic feeling. You can see with the acrylic here, we just have more direct light and we get this awesome reflection. And over here, we have even more space than before. I think for the time being, I'll just set everything back up the way it was just to get it up and running, but obviously we actually have space to work with, and if we want even more space, we could actually move the shelving unit away from the wall so that way we could further extend the potential desk area. There is still a lot that has to be done here, and we still have to take into account for cable management, but this is going to be a fantastic spot for the Mac Pro. The MacBook will most likely stay as it is right now because I'm still using that for iTunes, but once everything actually gets moved over to the tower, we're going to have to redo all the cable management because there's going to be a lot of cables here, and there's also going to be a lot more accessories that we will eventually set up in this area here, just like the monitor. Sometimes you just have to keep things simple, and I think that this is actually going to work out surprisingly well in the long run. I'll work on the small details about this, making it as nice as I can possibly make it, but when it comes down to it, is this actually a usable surface? Well, apparently, it is. Now, it's not perfect. It does actually fluctuate between -1 and 0 degrees, as you saw right there, but I mean, it's close enough. I think I might have to raise this side a bit, but apart from that, it's a nice stable surface. It can support a decent amount of weight here, and I'm obviously not going to put anything heavy here. It's really only going to be the monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, and maybe the occasional iPhone, iPod. Really just small stuff. Obviously nothing like this. I could reinstall the shelving units here, but considering I'm not using those all the time, I think that the Mac Pro just makes more sense in this area, and I can reuse the shelving units somewhere else. The iTunes library is officially back online, but now with the Mac Pro. This setup has easily surpassed any expectations I had because it is so cool to see it set up like this. We have not one, but two Mac desktops, a CRT monitor that is actually part of the setup with a fantastic picture, and even though I do still need to adjust some of the built-in settings, it is working really well, and it is just so cool to see this display in action. Even though the MacBook itself has been disconnected for the meantime, it's still a good backup machine, and I guess the best way to describe it is that it's in standby. We can still use it whenever, but considering we have other machines to work on as well, I'm going to focus on the Mac Pro because it still needs to be set up with different programs and applications. Another cool addition about the Mac Pro upgrade is that we actually have digital audio coming into the mini disc system because we actually have optical output on the Mac Pro. Now, even though this unit doesn't have digital output, we can still use the digital input to record digital audio onto the mini discs. And right now, the mini disc system is actually working as a digital to analog converter. We don't have a mini disc in here. It is directly from the Mac, but if I don't want to use this, I can power this off, switch the input, switch the output device on the Mac itself to line output, and just like that, we have audio again. It's a fantastic system. It really works well with one another. Obviously, we can still use individual components without having to rely on other systems. Now that we've upgraded and made the setup here more functional than ever, I want to take a small break from it and focus more on the shelving units. Considering we're doing all of this restructuring here, it only makes sense to also try and consolidate these as much as possible because I want to make these more useful than they currently are. They've been fantastic, but in terms of organization, it's rough at best. If these were actually organized the way they should be, ideally only one of these would have power cables. But as it is right now, there's power cables in there, down here, in that one, and also on top of this one, and it's just a complete mess. This drawer is completely filled up with PC cables, accessories, and honestly a whole bunch of other stuff that should definitely be split up between 2 or more of these drawers. The top one here has other accessories which are more Apple stuff, but it's also filled up with remote controls for some reason. That has coax cable for some reason. There's batteries in there, handheld accessories, and I don't even remember what's actually in this one, which means that it probably shouldn't be there in the first place. I know for a fact I have other accessories and cables that could easily be put into these, and these are super handy to have because, well, everything is right here. Instead of having power cables or coax cable that rarely ever get used, I could easily put in some Ethernet cables that would actually be used, especially with the redesign of the setup here. And I also have a whole bunch of PC accessories that could easily be put into one of these, so extra mice, maybe some keyboards that are small enough to fit into this. There is so much more potential here, and, well, we just have to start by actually opening this up, taking everything out, and reorganizing it one by one. Did I say that this would be a small break? Because that honestly couldn't have been farther from the truth. So initially I began by just taking everything out of the drawers here, obviously starting with easy stuff like power cables, Ethernet cables, VGA, and other video cables. What I didn't realize is that this project slowly evolved into partially rearranging absolutely everything that I have, which was not expected, but honestly, I'm actually really happy with how it turned out because it not only revealed other cables that I had in storage, which I was able to put in here, it just made so much more space. I've just been rearranging a whole lot, and it feels like I have double the space than what I had before, and we still have this awesome setup to work with, which we'll get to the rest of the setup later on. Honestly, I'm really happy with how this turned out because I even found some stuff that I completely forgot about. Now, first off, I want to talk about these MacBook batteries. Now, I don't have the MacBook for this model, but I'm holding on to it in case I do actually get that MacBook in the future, and at the same time, cosmetically, it seems to be in good shape. It's not bloated, and even if it does have a lot of charge cycles, well, I don't know because I have no way of testing it. These two batteries, though, are for the MacBook. These are all official Apple batteries, which is really cool, but when it comes to the second battery here for the MacBook, I don't really remember where I got it from. When I first got the MacBook forever ago, I distinctly remember charging up a battery with it when I was actually using it. Now, I'm pretty sure it was this battery which has since, failed as a battery. It's not able to really hold a charge, but I've had it in the MacBook the entire time I've been using it, mainly just so we don't have a battery-sized hole here. But as I started to rearrange stuff and discover cables and other things, I found this battery. I don't remember the last time I even tested it, but I jokingly pressed the power LED here, and to my surprise, it actually works. Now, I've since charged it up because I don't even remember the last time that was plugged in, but it holds a charge. It can actually power the MacBook on a charge. Insane. Here I have a functional battery that I could have been using this entire time. Now granted, this was used more as a desktop because of the backlight issue, which has been an issue ever since I've got the MacBook. But I guess I have another battery for it, which is excellent. And I'm still going to hold on to this because at the very least, it can actually occupy the battery bay. And it is still official Apple. As for the cables inside the shelves here, I can say that this is probably the first time all of these types of cables have been organized into one spot. Not like half organized in one area and then in another, or just all over the place. These are actually organized, which is such a crazy concept, I know. But this is such an awesome quality of life improvement that I kind of wish I did this earlier, but honestly, I'm just glad that it's done now. You'll see what I mean. First off, we have video. Now, most of these are VGA cables, but this is also intended for DVI, HDMI, HDMI to DVI, those types of cables. As for home theater and home entertainment gear like composite components, those are elsewhere in a separate area. This is primarily computer stuff. We have even more computer equipment here. Now this is primarily focused on USB stuff, so on this side we have USB extenders and USB-A to USB-B cables. Here we have micro USB, and I think there were some mini USB cables, but obviously this is where they would go. And in the back we have even more cables, but also some accessories that I really don't have a good spot elsewhere. But as you can see, we have enough space here to make it work, and considering it's all computer equipment, it just makes sense to leave it there. The last drawer here is primarily focused on brand new cables. So this is all brand new. As you can see, we have Ethernet cables, but underneath those we also have computer accessories, we have some laptop accessories, stuff that's just all brand new and hasn't been used. At the same time though, I am also using this for all of my phone cables because even though ideally I would like to have those with the networking side of things, we'll talk about that in a moment. It is working out great though, and if I actually do happen to find some other brand new cables, we do still have some room left over. But with that, this drawer is now completely functional and so much better than it was before. Next up, we have even more computer accessories, but this is oriented towards hard drives and RAM. Now those boxes are empty, but they actually have some good containers for RAM, so if I do get some spare sticks, I have some storage. This box is also filled up with hard drives, and I do have some anti-static bags for them, so they are protected and everything is self-contained in this one container. Ideally, I would actually like to use some of those hard drives, but it's been an entire process just to get this set up. But one day, once I actually have more computers or whatever set up, I have hard drives ready to go. This drawer probably looks the worst, but honestly, this is still way better than before because I didn't even realize I had so many Ethernet cables to begin with. We do also have some network accessories in the back, which will eventually be put to use alongside some Ethernet cables, because in terms of networking, we're just getting started with this setup. And once we have more space available, the phone cables will be transferred here. Here we have all the power cables. We do have a couple of extensions here, but most of them are actually the figure 8 style on the left, and on the right here we have the standard IEC power cables for computers and monitors. These two are Apple themed, but the top one is more for iOS devices, and the bottom one is more for MacBooks and Mac desktops. So obviously we just have some chargers, we have some docks, we have some adapters. Basically anything that can work with iOS devices, it's all in here. Now obviously some of the cables here can work with iOS, such as this extension cable can work with an iPad charger, but just to keep it simple, it's in here. And we also have a variety of adapters, we also have a remote, and I also decided to put some FireWire cables here because, well, Mac stuff and FireWire go really well together. And in the very last drawer we have a selection of mice and a small PS2 keyboard. All of these have been cleaned up, they are known to be functional, and in general it's just really cool to see all of these organized and easy to access if I do actually need something. Even though this took so much more time than I initially expected, it was certainly worth it because it's organized. I think for now we're just going to move these off to the side so we have some more space to work with the setup itself. I don't necessarily know where they're going to stay yet, but fortunately they are super easy to move around. Now we get to talk about this. This is kind of what I had in mind from the beginning. Moving things around really helped put stuff into perspective. Now we can talk about all the different possibilities of this setup here forever, but instead of doing that, I just want to actually get something up and running. So we'll have that Dell with this monitor hooked up, and even though it's not going to be like the final solution or a permanent solution like the Y2K setup, at least it's going to be kind of operational, and at the very least it's going to give us a basis of how to actually expand the setup. Now, even though there's going to be a lot of room for improvement, I also have a lot of other projects that I still need to get to, and I want to finish this first before I move on to the other stuff, because at the very least I can actually start to make use of the space here and not have random stuff like this printer here. This continues to go beyond any expectations I had, because just look at it. It's a completely beige setup. Everything is from the 90s. And can you believe I actually had all this stuff just sitting around, not in use? Well, this is exactly why I wanted to do something like this, because it's awesome. And now I can actually use some more systems with this setup. Now, I wasn't really too sure what to expect here, and I thought it would be more of a temporary solution, but honestly, I think that this is going to be a permanent install in the new setup area here. Now, in terms of the PC itself, I just used this Dell because it's easy to set up. I know it has Windows on it, and I thought it would be a good test system just to see how everything works, but it isn't going to be the only desktop that I'll be using here. Obviously, we have so much room for different desktops, and I have a wide variety of different PCs to actually install here. And also with this specific Dell, I kind of want to clean up the Windows XP install, because the hard drive is from another Dell which has a whole bunch of various files that honestly it's just a big mess, and I don't want to use this permanently in the setup until that gets solved. Oh, and also I guess I'll mention this before we move on. The reason why I have some cardboard here under the display is because this is plastic and this is metal, and if this is directly on the shelf itself, obviously we have not like a solid flat surface. These will start to leave impressions in the plastic, and I don't want to damage the plastic. And it also gives us a nice stable surface for it to actually sit on. So if this is our main desk setup, this is like the corner part of the desk where we still have all this space to make use of, but obviously it's not like we can have another complete setup here. Now initially I was planning on having that HP printer here, the silver and translucent one. However, when I powered it up, it just gave me an error message, and it doesn't have any ink cartridges. Now, it probably still will work with Windows, with the software, but I haven't tested it enough to determine if that's really possible. And honestly, I can't really be bothered right now because a printer is the least of my concerns. My printer situation is a bit weird because even though I have several printers, most of them have one problem or another, and I do actually have a beige HP printer that would look fantastic with the setup, but I don't even have the power supply for it. So apart from it cosmetically looking cool, I don't even know if it works because I have no way of powering it up. Now the silver and translucent HP printer has been put off to the side because, like I mentioned, I don't really want to mess with that right now. And I also remembered that I actually have an HP printer which has never given me any problems whatsoever. This HP OfficeJet. Now I know it's newer than the other one. It's kind of out of place because it's way more modern compared to this setup, but this just works. Like, it'll power up, it'll pass its self-test, and even though the ink cartridges barely have any ink, it doesn't complain about it whatsoever. It just works. In fact, it will actually still try to print something even though the results will be terrible. Now, if I had a printer that takes a toner cartridge, one of those laser printers, I'm sure I would end up using it more often as an actual printer, but considering every single printer that I have takes an ink cartridge, I honestly just can't be bothered right now. I don't really have a need for it. I figured, why not actually put it here? Because who knows, we may end up using it here, and it's close enough to the Macs where we could actually hook it up to the G5 or even the Mac Pro if for some reason we actually wanted a printer connected up to it. I also cleaned up the printer off camera because, as you can imagine, after years of sitting, it was pretty dusty. Fortunately though, all the plastics are still in great condition and it still looks like a brand new printer. This printer also features a flatbed scanner, and I have a dedicated scanner elsewhere, so I'm fine with leaving this here. And who knows, it might actually be fun to use a scanner here with some retro equipment. With this out of the way now, we can actually focus on this because I'm really happy with how this turned out, and honestly I can't wait to use this more. This is a special organizer which is customizable, but I've arranged it in this 2x2 orientation here, and as you can see I've already started to fill it up. Here we have some software, so we have some installation medias for macOS and Windows. Now this is not going to stay like this permanently, but this is the GPU out of the Dell right here because it has a weird video connector, and I also have some floppy disks here. This Sony battery box is actually the perfect size for some floppies, so I will probably leave this as it is. And down here we have some Steve Jobs, and we also have a zip drive. I might actually use this for extra storage. Obviously like extra drives that would fit here, like a floppy drive or something else. I'm not really sure what I'll put here, but I had this sitting around, so why not leave it there? I actually have an idea of what to put up here, and I think it might actually turn out really cool. So cable management could be improved upon because it barely makes it over to the beige power strip, and I also had to move the entire organizer a bit to the right. But as you can see, we actually have a digital clock here. It's a Sony clock, and it's also beige, so it matches the rest of the beige setup, which is really cool. I wasn't using this otherwise, and I think that this will be a nice fun addition to the setup overall. It's a small addition, but I think it goes really well, especially with the beige setup. CRTs, cinema display, good old Dell LCD monitors, and PowerPC alongside Intel. This is turning out to be such a cool, awesome spot with all of these different setups, and we still obviously have more room for improvement, and I can't wait to get to that. But honestly, I'm just happy that this part of the setup itself is done, because even though the video itself isn't the longest I've ever made, this has been quite time consuming because just to get all those cables organized took absolutely forever. I can't wait to use everything here even more, and I don't even know what else we could actually add here because it seems like the possibilities are endless. And I think with all of the awesome progress that we've made so far, now's a good time to wrap up today's video because I have so many other projects in mind that I just can't wait to get to. But I'm really glad that we finally got this part of the setup here done, and this setup is looking super cool. It's like the beige equivalent of the Y2K setup. If you enjoyed today's video, then consider leaving a thumbs up. And if you want to see more awesome content about CRTs, cinema displays, and in general just awesome hardware in action, then consider subscribing because we have so many cool projects that I can't wait to get to. And it seems like we're only going to ramp up production from here because if this is considered a small upgrade, I can't wait to see what else is possible here. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.